Hi guys, this video is going to be the craziest video for the Quant and XRP community. I'm going to show you probably for the first time that the unified ledger, the shared ledger, the regulated liability network, the regulated settlement network, the regulated internet of value, which is what it was first called at the very beginning. That's the first time they ever mentioned the regulated liability network. They actually called it the regulated internet of value, which I'll show as well. All of those names, all of those projects, Project Enbridge, Project Agora are the same thing. They are all the shared ledger, also known as the unified ledger. And I'm going to show you a proof that the shared ledger is not Quant. Quant plays a crucial role in the programmability, interoperability, and common APIs, but the actual shared ledger itself is not Quant. Gilbert Verdian himself said, we also brought in R3, who is bringing in the shared ledger where all of the tokenized assets reside. Let me repeat that. Gilbert Verdian said, while he was talking about the regulated liability network, we also partnered with R3 because R3 are the ones bringing in the shared ledger where all of the tokenized assets reside. He didn't say one of the shared ledgers or one ledger. No, he said the shared ledger, as in just one. But he also said very clearly that all of the tokenized assets reside on this ledger, which means the unified ledger has to be the shared ledger as well. And so, since the unified ledger is the shared ledger, and Gilbert Verdian confirmed that the shared ledger is not Quant, that means the unified ledger is not Quant. He's telling you the unified ledger is not Quant. And also we see the unified ledger being built on the interledger protocol, not on Quant overledger and not on the secure asset transfer protocol. That's very different. And this is another thing I'm trying to explain to the Quant community, that the secure asset transfer protocol, which Quant has built with the IETF, does not replace the need for a bridge currency and a global liquidity token. It is different. The secure asset transfer protocol is to move one asset from one network to another. When you don't have sufficient liquidity within certain pairs, then you do need liquidity, you do need bridge currency. And this bridge currency is XRP. And the XRP ledger built on the interledger protocol. There is no other interledger protocol. And when he says tokenized assets, this means CBDCs as well, because CBDCs are a tokenized asset. It's a central bank digital currency. It's a sovereign currency, which is tokenized. So that means CBDCs, stocks, bonds, derivatives, everything on this shared ledger. I need the Quant community to understand this. Listen, I'm all about Quant. There's nothing bigger than Quant. I spent 5,000 to 7,000 hours researching Quant over the past 5 years. Literally 5 to 10 hours per day almost. And I've spent over 10,000 hours researching XRP. And I'm telling you guys, the unified ledger is not Quant. The unified ledger is XRP. Think about it. And I have so much respect for all of these top Quant researchers that I've learned so much from, right? Tokenizer, Greg Line, all of you guys. I really appreciate everything I've learned from you. But I'm seeing some of you amazing people still saying that the unified ledger is Quant. And I know it looks like it is, but when you really think about it, I'm going to repeat this 100 times and I do apologize. But I think it's the only way that I can get the community to understand. Gilbert Verdian said all of the tokenized assets reside on the shared ledger, which he had to partner with R3 for, because it's R3 who's bringing in the shared ledger. So if all of the tokenized assets in the world, which includes CBDCs, reside on the shared ledger, that means that the unified ledger is the shared ledger. Otherwise, what assets is there left? What assets would be on the unified ledger if the unified ledger is completely different than the shared ledger? What assets would there be on Project Enbridge, Project Agora, Project Rosalind, all these other projects, Project Aperta, Project Mariana? What assets would be basically on those ledgers or platforms if all of the tokenized assets that exist are on the shared ledger? Which means all of those projects, including the unified ledger, has to be the shared ledger. There's no other way. This is what Gilbert Verdian said. So I'm going to show you a clip of Gilbert Verdian saying that. And I'm also going to show you a clip of Tony McLaughlin from Citibank. He talks about the regulated liability network and the shared ledger again. And he says that basically the shared ledger is technically all of the banks in the world. He specifically says central banks, commercial banks, and fintechs all on one shared ledger. He says this essentially is what the regulated liability network is. So he's basically confirming that the shared ledger And the regulated liability network is the same thing, which means the regulated settlement network and the regulated Internet of Value is all the same thing. And like I said, guys, you have to think here. There's no other way that all of these projects cannot be technically on the shared ledger. There's no other way. What assets would they hold? I got a really good video for you guys. So I do apologize for the editing. As you're going to see, it's one of my first videos, so the editing is not the best. But my friends, having researched Quant for 5,000 to 7,000 hours, and basically XRP Ledger for over 10,000 hours, I promise you this is a very important video to watch, because I'm seeing all the information being put out there in regards to the unified ledger, and a lot of people still think it's Quant. Quant is providing the programmability, interoperability, and common APIs. Quant is an overlay on top of the shared ledger. I have so much stuff to show you guys. I can't wait. Please bear with me. Please be patient with me. Watch this video. It's gonna show you a lot of things you might not have seen or realized. So here you can see that the unified ledger is related to the interledger protocol. Unified ledger is related to the interledger protocol. My brother here, Greg Lunt, which I respect a lot, says, sorry to break it to the XRP crowd, but when the BIS talks about the unified interledger protocol, UILP, they're not talking about Ripple's interledger protocol, ILP. I'm sorry, Greg, you're mistaken there, my friend. Hey, look up to you. I appreciate everything I've learned from you. I'm here to help. You're mistaken there, buddy. There is only one interledger protocol. There is no such thing as a different interledger protocol that's different than the one that XRP is built on. No way, my friend. So I encourage you to watch my whole video and a few other videos I've posted.
Let's look at Gilbert Verdi and explain the regulated liability.
So Quant brings its heritage and expertise in creating DLT-based financial infrastructure for all forms of tokenized digital assets and money to be interoperable. We're bringing a multitude of solutions and technology. This includes enhanced programmability, which is over and above what we've done before in CBDCs and fit for commercial banks, interoperability across networks and different types of DLTs. The interconnectivity of all of these is orchestrated through our technology and presented through a banking grade API. We're also partnering with R3 on the project, which are bringing in the shared ledger where all the tokenized assets will reside.
You see how he said that we're providing the programmability, interoperability, and standardized API, but we also partnered with R3, who is bringing in the shared ledger. Gilbert Verdi is telling you this right here. It's not me, just an average dude telling you this, okay? This is Gilbert Verdi and the GOAT. So they partnered with R3 for that specific reason, because it's R3 that's bringing in the shared ledger where all of the tokenized assets reside, which means that this is a blockchain, because the fact that the tokenized assets reside on this ledger means it's a blockchain. It's a distributed ledger, right? Because tokenized assets do not live on a legacy system or on an operating system. We're going to listen to Tony McLaughlin here. He was talking with somebody else from Citibank not too long ago. The name of the meeting they had was City Digital Dispatch, Regulated Liability Network, episode 1. This was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Couldn't find a clip because they always delete the clips because they don't want us to figure out what the heck's going on. Okay, so here on page 3, so this is what Tony McLaughlin says. And Tony McLaughlin is a guy that you always see sitting on stage with Gilbert Verdi, and another GOAT is the head of digital assets technology at Citibank. So if you're in Quant, you know Tony McLaughlin. He says, talking about the banks, that traditional money works, that bank money works at the moment is every bank has its own database. So your deposit with your bank is recorded on your bank data center. They've got a database. Now then, if you zoom out, there are 25,000 banks in the world. So 25,000 data centers, 25,000 databases, separate islands of data. And shared ledger and blockchain, you've got a common database, essentially. So the question is there a possibility to migrate the traditional banking system, take the same kind of institutions, the central banks, the commercial banks, and the fintechs, and migrate them onto a shared ledger, And that's what the regulated liability network essentially is. So he's telling you that the regulated liability network is the shared ledger, one shared ledger, and he's giving you the exact same description, technically, but in a different way. Gilbert Verdi described it as all of the tokenized assets in the world, and Tony McLaughlin is explaining it a different way. So Very, very important to keep that in mind. So now we've confirmed that the shared ledger is not Quant, Gilbert Vernon's own word. And now we've also confirmed that the regulated liability network and the shared ledger is the exact same thing. Quant is providing everything else, the programmability, the interoperability, allowing all the legacy systems in the world to connect into it, and so on and so forth. I'm going to move on here and show you a bunch of things. So now I'm going to go through different projects that are talking about a unified ledger, a regulated liability network, could be related to the shared ledger, and so on. For example, Singapore's MAS Global Layer 1. They're talking about Global Layer 1 here, okay? So right here, a Global Layer 1. Putting the Global Layer 1 in context, there are 3 other major initiatives along similar lines. It's the shared ledger, where all of the tokenized assets reside. Isn't that interesting? XC. Why did they use XC out of all of the words that they could have used? Why would they use XC? Could it be, actually, oh wait, just one sec here. XC concept for cross-border payments. So here they talk about Project Dunbar for cross-border CBDC. Again, Project Dunbar, talking about CBDCs. It has to be used using the unified ledger or the shared ledger, which is the same thing. All of the tokenized assets live on this shared ledger. When we look at the Finternet diagrams, unified ledger diagrams, and documents from the BIS, Bank for International Settlements, which is central bank for all central banks, we are clearly seeing them mention the interledger protocol, okay? And this is very, very important. What role does the interledger protocol play here? The interledger protocol is different than the secure asset transfer protocol, which Quant created. As the secure asset transfer protocol is to move one digital asset from one network to another network. It's not to convert from one type of asset to another. To do that, you need liquidity. You need a bridge asset to do that. Here, they're talking about the New York Fed. Members of the U.S. financial sector demonstrates feasibility of multi-asset and cross-network settlement using shared ledger technology. In this document, they called it the Regulated Settlement Network. At first, they talked about it. They said that the shared ledger, they said it's a regulated Internet of Value. Then they said it's the Regulated Liability Network. Now they're calling it the Regulated Settlement Network. And sometimes they've talked about this just saying the Internet of Value, right? And then you've got the Finternet, Financial Internet, which is technically Internet of Value, same thing. They've changed the name again. And like I said, Project Agora, they're all the same. It's all this shared ledger. This is what I want everybody to understand. It's one shared ledger. This is what Gilbert, I'm going to explain to you later on actually what this shared ledger is, how it's able to be shared. So right here, as I was saying, this is document from the BIS, okay, the high-level architecture of the Finternet. And right here, you see the unified interledger protocol. So this shared ledger is related to the interledger protocol. Quant is not built on the interledger protocol. So interledger protocol, unified ledger, interledger protocol. So right here, he's going to talk about the shared ledger, the regulated liability network, technically being a settlement layer. It's about settlement, and it's DLT that does settlement, not an operating system, technically. Let's hear what he says here.
To a corporate which is connected to Bank B, you would have atomic settlement of the transaction through simultaneous update of balances, not just on the bank side, but also in the central bank partition. This would allow RLN to become a settlement layer for settling central bank money and commercial bank money in the same environment.
I had messed up the order of the video there, sorry. Right here, as I was showing you the Finternet, right? The unified interledger protocol. So let me show you what the interledger protocol actually does and how it differs from the secure asset transfer protocol. So here I asked Grok 3, which is the AI, Grok 3 AI for the XAI. So I said, tell me briefly, what is the interledger protocol? The interledger protocol is an open, decentralized protocol for facilitating payments across different financial networks. It connects disparate payment systems like banks, blockchains, and digital assets, enabling seamless, low-cost transactions. Its specialty lies in the ability to route payments efficiently across incompatible ledgers, ensuring interoperability without relying on a single currency or centralized authority. I told the AI, tell me briefly, what is the XRP ledger's relationship with the interledger protocol? The XRP ledger integrates with the interledger protocol. ILP enables XRPL, the XRP ledger, to connect with other financial systems like banks or blockchains for seamless interoperability transactions. XRPL can act as a settlement layer. What did he say?
atomic settlement, can act as a settlement layer. A lot of people think that atomic settlement means that you can just swap without having a bridge asset. You cannot swap without having a bridge asset. Atomic settlement simply means that the transaction is either going to go through completely 100% or is not going to go through at all. The secure asset transfer protocol, with its gateways on each side, which we will host with QNT tokens, is to move an asset from one network to another. It's not to convert one asset for another. For example, if Citibank wants to send tokens to JP Morgan and JP Morgan is willing to take the Citibank tokens, that's fine. Citibank can send Citibank token, the Citi token, to JP Morgan on its network. But what if JP Morgan doesn't want Citibank tokens? Like, we don't want that. We want euros, or we want USD. We don't want Citi token. Well, then you need a bridge asset. You need liquidity. I'm going to show different guys from the BIS explaining that you need a bridge asset when there's no liquidity, when it's not a popular pair. I'm going to show you a bunch of stuff. XRP-L, XRP Ledger can act as a settlement layer, with XRP sometimes used as a bridge currency within ILP's routing. While both enable interoperability, ILP, the Interledger Protocol, is lightweight and payment-oriented, while the Secure Asset Transfer Protocol, SATP, is structured and asset transfer focused. So the Secure Asset Transfer Protocol is about, like I said, it's to transfer assets from one to another. And then I asked it, I said, can Quant Overledger do what the XRP Ledger does? And this is what the AI said. Quant Overledger and the XRP Ledger serve different purposes and cannot be considered direct substitutes, as their functionalities and focuses diverse significantly. Conclusion: Quant Overledger cannot fully replicate what the XRP Ledger does, as XRPL is a specialized blockchain for fast, scalable payments, while Overledger is an interoperability layer for connecting blockchains and systems. Overledger could incorporate XRPL's functionality into broader workflows, but Quant doesn't natively perform XRP settlement's role. They are better seen as complementary, with Overledgers potentially enhancing the XRPL's reach across networks. The shared ledger is the XRP ledger, or worst case scenario, the shared ledger could technically be the XRP ledger, the XLM Stellar, which is a clone of the XRP ledger, and maybe XDC, for example, Zinfin, all interconnected with the Interledger protocol. It technically could be, but even if that was the case, XRP Ledger would still get 90% of the volume, because they're the main ones working with all of the central banks. But let's see what he says again here. He says, talking about Quant, he says, Quant Overledger could incorporate XRP Ledger's functionality into broader workflows, but doesn't natively perform XRPL's settlement role. It's telling you the AI here has all the information on the internet, all the information that Quant has ever produced, all the information that's ever been produced about Ripple, XRP, so on. And he's telling you, AI, Grok, is top AI that you can have right now. And he's telling you that the Quant doesn't natively perform XRPL's settlement role. It cannot settle a transaction on its own. The Quant Overledger does not have the capacity to do it on its own, because Quant Overledger is an operating system that Gilbert Verdian built so that people would be able to use multi-chain applications. They would be able to build applications that use more than one blockchain at the same time. And I'm going to show you this real quick here in a few minutes. I'm going to show you all of the scenarios, different multi-chain applications that Quant would have developed, where they use Ethereum for something, they'll use Hyperledger for something else, it'll use Bitcoin for storage and XRP for settlement. Then I asked it, give me a short answer, please. And it says, no, Quant Overledger cannot fully replicate XRP's ledger role. XRP is a blockchain for fast, low-cost payments with XRP as a bridge currency. Overledger enables interoperability across blockchain, but doesn't natively handle settlements like XRP. They're complementary, not interchangeable. Quant doesn't replace the XRP ledger, and XRP certainly doesn't replace Quant. By acting as a universal connector, Overledger leverages each blockchain's strength, XRPL for speed, Ethereum for flexibility, to enable enterprise-grade cross-network solutions without requiring a single chain to dominate. Again, I've had some debates in the telegrams with people in the Quant community, and they forget that Quant's an operating system. Quant on its own even if it's the biggest, doesn't do anything. It's an operating system, and it gets its powers when you start connecting blockchains to it. It allows people to build multi-chain applications. Go back to the ICO that Gilbert Verdine said on stage. He said, like, we built, like, that's Quant 101. If you go to kindergarten to learn about Quant, the first thing they tell you is it's an operating system that Gilbert Verdine built so that we can use multi-chain applications. We can use more than one blockchain at the same time. That's why he built it. Quant on its own doesn't do anything. So, because sometimes in a Telegram group, I'll be like, oh, I might be using Avalanche for that, or Quant might be using XRP for this. And then some guys are like, oh, stupid XRP army. Quant doesn't do anything without blockchains. So every MDAP that exists, every solution that you see, every product that you see Quant building, even all the chain products, all of the Oracle blockchain solutions, all of them are technically MDAPs, multi-chain applications that were built using Quant Overledger and multiple blockchains. There's not one Quant solution or product that doesn't use blockchain. They all use blockchain. So the question is, which blockchain are they using for all these different solutions? And that's what I mean, because sometimes when you're discussing some people in the Quant community, you try to tell them like they're using XRP Ledger for this or they're using XLM for this, and like immediately they think you're crazy. No, Quant does it all. No. You can't do nothing with Quant without blockchain. You can't. It's insane. It's like buying Microsoft Windows operating system, not installing it in your computer, just putting it there on your desk. You're not going to be able to do anything with that operating system because it's not connected to your computer. It's not downloaded, installed in your computer. Same like Quant. If you don't connect it to blockchain and you don't connect it to legacy systems, you can't do nothing. Without blockchain, Quant doesn't do nothing at all. This is the example of multi-chain applications, okay? So I asked the AI, say, give me some examples in which XRP would be one of the blockchains used by Overledger. Then it answers that Quant Overledger can integrate the XRP ledger with other blockchains to leverage XRP strength in fast, low-cost settlement. Here are some examples use case where XRPL is one of the blockchains involved. First example, cross-border payment and settlement. So the scenario is a global remittance platform uses Overledger to settle payments across borders. Blockchain used, these are the blockchains here used, okay, blockchains. XRPL for instant low-cost settlement using XRP, Ethereum for smart contract-based payment agreements, and Hyperledger for private banking records. And then it goes on, it tells about what is the role of the XRPL. Within this is an MDAP. This is a multi-chain application built on Quant Overledger, okay? So what is the role for XRP? Role for XRP. XRP facilitates rapid cross-border transfers while Ethereum handles conditional payments and Hyperledger ensures compliance. Scenario 1. Trade finance with real-time liquidity. A supply chain finance solution automates invoice payments and trade settlements. Which blockchains would be used for this product that was built with Quant? Which blockchains would be used in this case? Blockchains. XRPL for real-time XRP-based payments, Corda for tokenized trade documents, and Polygon for low-cost transaction logging. What is the role of XRP in this case? For this multi-chain application built with Quant, XRP's role would be XRP provides liquidity for instant invoice settlements, with Corda securing the contracts and Polygon tracking the transaction. So let's look at another scenario here. Hybrid DeFi platform. Scenario 1. Another scenario. A decentralized finance app offers cross-chain lending with XRP as collateral. Blockchains. XRPL for XRP-based collateral transfers, Ethereum for lending smart contracts, and the Binance chain for user wallet integration. XRPL enables fast collateral movement, while Ethereum manages the loan logic, and the Binance chain supports user access to the wallets. So that's what Gilbert Verdine said. He said, you're not limited to one blockchain. You can pick and choose the best features of each chain and build a multi-chain application. That's why when he was on stage, he said, what can we build with it? We don't know yet, because literally the possibilities are endless. They're absolutely endless. It's literally this universal interoperability between every single software, systems, legacy systems, apps, and every blockchain network that will ever exist. So what you can do with Quant is unlimited. It's complete insanity. There's nothing bigger than Quant. But it's just to explain that the shared ledger itself is not Quant. It's not Quant. I'm sorry. It's just not Quant. I didn't make that decision. I'm far from the person that makes those kinds of decisions. So let's look just another scenario or two here. So supply chain payment automation. Scenario, a global supply chain tracks goods and automates payments upon delivery. Blockchain, XRPL for XRP payments to suppliers, the Hyperledger Fabric for private shipment records, and Ethereum for transparent provenance data. Role of XRP: XRP settles supplier payment instantly, with Hyperledger securing logistics and Ethereum ensuring public auditability. Another application, NemDApp for digital identity for financial inclusion. Scenario: provides verifiable identities for unbanked users to access financial services. Blockchains: XRPL for low-cost XRP transactions to fund account. Ethereum for decentralized identity, DID standards, and Stellar for micropayments. The role of XRP enables affordable account funding, manages the IDs, and Stellar supports small value transfer. Each case over Ledger uses XRPL's speed and cost efficiency for XRP-based settlements. They'll do it for tokenization too, and all of these other different use cases that you can do on the shared ledger. The XRP ledger is the shared ledger because the XRP ledger is built on the interledger protocol. And Gilbert Verdian said it's R3 that's bringing in the shared ledger where all of the tokenized assets reside. And R3 had a partner, I explained this in another video. R3 had a major partnership with Ripple where they were given 5 billion XRPs for less than a penny. Many years ago, there was a lawsuit, ended up settling, and now R3 has 1 billion XRP. But they got sued because they weren't holding their weight. They were not holding their weight. They were not bringing enough volume or utility or whatever to the XRP ledger at the time. They got sued, then they settled. And now they have 1 billion XRP, but now they have to hold their weight. I'll explain in another video. And it's SBI out of Japan that helped them to make that settlement. And SBI is the biggest shareholder, I believe, in R3. And SBI is also 10% shareholder in Ripple. What a coincidence. So while I'm at it, while I'm talking about that, let me show you this here. So this is a paper from SBI Group years ago. SBI owns, I think, like 90% of the banks in Japan, something like that. They own 10% of Ripple, and they're the biggest shareholder in R3. So here's a document from SBI many years ago. I think it's like 6-7 years ago. So they're talking about, so the first thing right here, it said declared full-scale efforts to resolve the R3 Ripple legal dispute. That's what it did. Then developing financial services for using with Corda, and then leverage XRP using Corda. Okay, and then September 10th, 2018, settlement announced between R3 and Ripple. And then just 3 months after, December 5th here, R3 releases the XRP settler that makes full use of the XRP ledger. The Corda settler app, remember that? Because when you talk about R3, you're talking about R3 Corda. The R3 Corda settler app, which is it's XRP. They called it the XRP settler. And then a few months after, even like a month and a half after, joint venture announced between SBI Holding and R3. And this is R3 this is the SBI Group document. This is not me. So R3 Ripple solution become a global standard for financial operations such as international money transfers and trade finance. Gilbert Verdian said it is R3. We've partnered with R3, who is bringing in the shared ledger where all of the tokenized assets will reside. Interesting. Investment phase, this was years ago, many years ago. SBI Group invests in 2 major companies that earned high marks globally to facilitate rapid proof of concept on innovative technology. So it was Ripple and it was R3. SBI is a major shareholder in Ripple and R3. This is another document here talking about the interledger protocol here. You see it right here, interledger protocol. You see the unified ledger. It's the shared ledger. Unified ledger and shared ledger is the same thing because, like I said, Gilbert Verdian said that all tokenized assets will reside on the shared ledger, all of the assets. And then Tony from Citibank said that all of the banks, including the central banks, are on the shared ledger, which is the regulated liability network. It's the unified ledger. We see that this unified ledger is built on the interledger protocol. The XRP ledger is built on the interledger protocol. Quant overledger is not built on the interledger protocol. Quant's an operating system is completely separate, which does everything else. So XRP for settlement, tokenization, all that stuff. It's because the XRP ledger sits on the interledger protocol. The interledger protocol is a very special protocol for payments and transfers. The XRP ledger is built on top of it. But a lot of people don't realize that the XRP ledger has a built-in decentralized exchange where people can do tokenization and everything. Cannot even imagine what you can do on the XRP ledger. It's a very specialized blockchain for payments, tokenization, settlement, and everything. So now we're just going to listen to a few quick videos, just a few short things about the interledger protocol. It's the XRP, the Ripple team talking about the interledger protocol, how they built the interledger protocol.
Interledger was a project that we invented while working at Ripple and then spun out as a separate open source project. Ripple's been paying a team of people to work on it full time for the past couple of years.
The challenge is for us to develop protocols that can allow us to make payments across those silos so that we can have payment systems, currencies, and protocols that are optimized for distinct use cases. That's what got Ripple interested in looking at protocols like Interledger.
If you wanted to visualize what Interledger looks like, you could draw it something like this, where it's just like the internet is based around routers, Interledger is based around a very similar concept of connectors. And what they do is they receive these Interledger packets, which are just packets of data, and they look at a routing table, just like a router would.
It's Ripple that built the Interledger protocol. This guy is going to mention the Interledger protocol as well. So we're going to listen to this guy a few minutes. He's talking about the Internet, and he mentions the Interledger protocol again.
Sure, which allows it to be user-centric, which allows multiple asset classes to be interoperable, and which creates a universal architecture for ledgers, how you write a token to the ledger, how you transfer a token, how do you do interledger protocols. All that can be standardized.
How to do Interledger protocols. Right here, I'm going to show you in this document how the regulated liability network was originally called the Regulated Internet of Value. The first time it was ever mentioned, it was called the Regulated Internet of Value, and they've changed the name. Isn't that interesting? Why is that? Like I said in another video, because everybody knows that the Internet of Value is Ripple. Quant is the Internet of Trust because it connects everything to blockchain. And the Internet of Trust is likely bigger than the Internet of Value. But Internet of Value is just a subset of the Internet of Trust because the Internet of Trust, Quant Overledger, overlays everything. So the Internet of Trust, technically the XRP ledger, for example, is just one vertical, right? Because you still have all of the other different use cases and different industries that is going to use blockchain. So we're talking healthcare. Quant allows us to develop blockchain solutions for every industry, right? So healthcare, self-driving cars, environment, and so on. Like it's never ending. Like there's so many different industries, not only liquidity and tokenization. But right here, it says, in essence, the regulated liability network is an interoperable network of commercial banks and central bank liabilities. The aim is the infrastructure to improve national and international payments by using distributed ledger technology. It's using a blockchain, right? And this is the kicker right here. It says the concept originates in the article entitled The Regulated Internet of Value, published by Citigroup in 2021. Representatives from various industries came together in 2022 to publish a white paper fleshing out the idea of the regulated liability network. The first time it was ever mentioned, they called it the regulated Internet of Value. And then sometimes they call it the regulated liability network. Sometimes they call it the regulated settlement. It's all the same thing. It's this shared ledger, but they're changing the name every freaking time so that we cannot, the retail investor will not basically able to pinpoint like, oh, this is one ledger. And the Quant is literally providing the interoperability, programmability, standardized APIs, and every single MDApp that can be built on top of this shared ledger, right? Here's a document that came from the Hyperledger Foundation, and it's no longer called the Hyperledger Foundation. I think it's an open source, can't remember the name, but the Hyperledger Foundation is massive. I encourage anybody to study the Hyperledger Foundation. There's nothing bigger than the Hyperledger Foundation, which is under the umbrella of the Linux Foundation. This document surfaced almost 7 years ago. It was produced by Everest and NTT Data within the Hyperledger Foundation, and it showed how the XRP ledger was the new global RTGS system. So you have all of the central banks. Let me just zoom this in. So it's talking about cross-border real-time gross settlement 2020-2025, and here you have the RTGS systems for every bank. So Bank of Japan uses NET. Then you have Target 2. Here are the countries on the left, and then the central banks. So the RTGS system, real-time gross settlement system, for all of the central banks, and it's all connected through the Interledger protocol, and it connects to the XRP ledger, and it says that the XRP ledger is the global RTGS, global real-time gross settlement. So the XRP ledger becomes the central bank for all the central banks technically, which is, we kind of say it like that because it becomes technically the new global reserve currency. It becomes a liquidity layer. And right here, it talks about how the Interledger protocol will enable financial institutions and central banks to make their existing infrastructure and processes interoperable with other currencies, asset classes, and the XRP ledger. Then explains what the XRP ledger is. It says XRP ledger, comma, the global liquidity marketplace. It's calling the global liquidity marketplace, the global decentralized RTGS system. Isn't that interesting? The XRP ledger right here. You see global RTGS up there. Right underneath is the XRP ledger. All connected. The global RTGS, the XRP ledger, will remove friction, cost, and risk from cross-currency transactions. Distributed ledger technology, and in particular,
the XRP Ledger will enable banks to settle cross-currency transactions in real time, something impossible today. The XRP Ledger can be accessed by all banks and liquidity providers, enabling healthy competition between banks and a better service for customers. Corresponding banks and liquidity providers will be able to reach more currency corridors and new customers, improving their services offering for other banks and clients. CB right here, corresponding bank and liquidity providers. See how they're all holding XRP. Every single one of them is holding XRP here. All the central banks are holding XRP, right? Those little blue symbols there. And in this document, again, it talks about APIs here, and it shows ILP, Interledger Protocol, talks about Corda Fabric. And right here, it shows key partnerships for the Internet of Value. You have Ripple, the Interledger Protocol, which is an open internet standard for connecting ledgers, and the R3 Corda. Isn't that interesting? Just for anyone who's new, every time that Ripple has said, we are building the Internet of Value, right? We are building the Internet of Value. We are building the Internet of Value. Nobody else is building the Internet of Value. Quant is extremely complementary to the Internet of Value because Quant allows us to build every single solution that exists. And then some of the solutions will eventually, it needs to tap into money because everything that we do in the world, you need money. You need to do transactions. So whether it's self-driving cars, every use case in the world, everything we do, eventually we need money to do it. So you do need a settlement layer. Quant provides all of the solutions that are going to be built for this new industrial age. Here, Whipple.com, realizing the Internet of Value. This was in 2018. Talked about the Internet of Value, how they're going to build it. Then here you've got W3C, a World Wide Web Consortium, I believe. The Internet of Value Manifesto, this was years ago. Then you see here, Ripple basically calling about building the Internet of Value.
Chris, how would you describe what the Internet of Value is?
So this is David Schwartz. He's asking Chris Larson, which is one of the founders of Ripple, what would you describe the Internet of Value is?
And what the insight is to get us there?
Yeah, so a lot of it came from the early work you guys did with pathfinding, and again, having this, anything of value can be traded. That was the germ of it. But stepping way back, if you look at the real problem in the world today, a lot of people point to globalization, and we would say,
so they're talking about building the Internet of Value there years ago. This was many, many years ago, actually. So this one was like 7 years ago.
I'm David Schwartz. Presentation is on enabling the Internet of Value, by which we mean being able to move value as easily as we move information.
So he goes on, explains exactly how they're going to build it. That was 6 years ago. Now I want to show you something really crazy about Ripple's private ledgers for central banks. Ripple has central bank digital currency platform, private platform where central banks around the world can build their CBDCs in private. So right here, the CBDC, so this is ripple.com, this is on their website, the CBDC private ledger. The CBDC private ledger is based on the same blockchain technology that powers the XRP ledger, which means that the CBDC private ledger is built for payments. What it's a clone of the XRP ledger. It's a side chain. And I believe RippleNet is technically a side chain as well. This is technically the CBDC because it's saying that it has the exact same features as the XRP ledger, but it's private. So like I said, it's a clone. It's completely separate from the public XRP ledger, but it's a sidechain. It's a carbon copy clone of it. The central banks are building on these sidechains all over the world. They're building on these sidechains of the XRP ledger. And this is why when you look at the documents, they talk about different partitions. The central bank builds its CBDC, and then from there, which using the XRP ledger, and from there, all of tokenization and commercial banks and everything like the commercial bank tokens and everything is being built on this partition, on this CBDC XRP ledger, this CBDC ledger, technically. Okay, so this is the shared ledger. When they talk about the XRP ledger, they talk about the shared ledger because it has all these different side chains that are carbon copies of the XRP ledger. So they can do their own privacy stuff. The central bank can do its own monetary policy. Whatever they do, it doesn't affect any other country. But when it comes to settling transactions from one country to another, cross-currency, they can go through the XRP ledger. Otherwise, they can just do their own thing, do their own monetary policy, and it doesn't affect anybody else. Right here, it says, this also means the CBDC private ledger that's built on the XRP ledger. The CBDC private ledger is designed for issuing currencies. Isn't that interesting? With over 5,400 currencies issued on the XRP ledger over the past 8 years, this article on that, including its native digital asset XRP, which can be leveraged as a neutral bridge asset for frictionless value movement between CBDCs and other currencies. Moving money on a CBDC private ledger will be cost-effective, reliable, and close to instantaneous. Okay, instantaneous settlement, real-time settlement. Transactions can also happen at volumes required by central banks. The CBDC private ledger will handle tens of thousands of transactions per second, initially with the potential to scale to hundreds of thousands transactions over time. In addition to leverage XRP ledger technology, the CBDC private ledger is also supported by RippleNet technologies and the Interledger suite of protocols to enable ultra-high throughput use cases such as micropayments. There's your Interledger right here. This is what I want to show you. This is the kicker. You know how we talk about Project Agora, Project Mbridge, and all these different massive CBDC projects are projects that are, so for example, Project Agora has like 7 central banks, I believe, and Project Mbridge has a multiple central banks, and say they're all connected with like this one shared ledger. Read this very carefully, my friends. Listen very carefully here. And Ripple here talking about their CBDC solution, they said, and we're just getting started. We are also working on a fresh approach where central banks will be able to join a network of CBDC ledgers that enables full settlement interoperability while allowing each member to retain their monetary and technological independence. We believe this will be a game changer for central banks and are excited to release more details on how it works very soon. So imagine this, they're working on a fresh approach where central banks will be able to join a network of CBDCs. A network, a platform where multiple CBDCs come together. Isn't that interesting? Is that not the description of Project Agora, Project Mbridge, and so many other projects that are saying that their projects are based on shared ledger technology, kind of a finternet architecture, and so on and so forth. It's never ending. So then I asked Perplexity AI to tell me what the Ripple CBDC platform does. So it says ledger technology for secure transactions, issuer module for managing the full life cycle of digital currency, operator functionality for institutional settlements and distribution, end user wallets for secure holding and transactions, customizable features to adapt currency plans through each stage of production, improved energy efficiency through the use of XRP Ledger's core technology, enhanced security features including multi-signing capability for issuers, support for offline transactions and non-smartphone use cases. Remember how some of the solutions that Quant was building was for offline payments? Ripple is one of the only blockchain that can do offline transactions. Then also the integration of anti-money laundering and know your customers. These are the main 2 regulations that are important globally. They are built in the CBDC platform. They are literally built in. They're hard-coded in there. Well, not hard-coded, but RippleNet was compliant, internationally compliant for anti-money laundering and know your customer for many years. A lot of people don't realize this. When the Ripple lawsuit was happening, everybody was panicking, and this was all BS because RippleNet was fully compliant and Ripple was not worried at all. The lawsuit is a complete BS. These improvements aim to address the evolving requirements of central banks and governments, positioning Ripple as a trusted partner in the rapidly expanding field of digital currencies. So here we're going to listen to a former Swift employee. He was with Swift for many years, and listen to what he explains about Swift and XRP.
Because we did speak earlier and you did tell me a little bit about this.
Yeah. So let's be very clear what Ripple is as far as we're concerned. Remember, it's a technology company, not only the provider of the crypto, the XRP currency, the digital asset. The whole point is linking up different players in the financial markets to ensure there's a rapid, guaranteed, transparent, frictionless movement of funds underlined with the XRP currency. There are 2 particular services being offered. The first one being the X-Current, where we're able to pay away immediately across Ripple in real time. Now, when we look at traditional payment methods, we're looking at perhaps hours or days to facilitate a payment anywhere in the world. And that means it has to go through a correspondent banking relationship. Not every bank deals with every other bank, which means there's a link between different players in the market. That takes time, could be money, and in some instances, weeks can go past, where a payment is trying to struggle its way through banks who don't necessarily have relationships with each other. There is money to be made by holding on to large amounts of money, and there's interest to be generated. So banks are not necessarily always very keen on disposing funds as quickly as they might be. What we're looking at using Ripple is an association, a network of financial institutions who have signed up to a rulebook, there are standards, the transparency, and a way to real-time move those funds between different currencies through payment and currency corridors.
This is what I want to show you. He's saying what we're looking at doing is joining RippleNet, where we have this network of banks and financial institutions that have all signed up with a rule book. So they're all compliant. A lot of people don't realize, I never hear anybody talking about this, but Ripple, the whole time, RippleNet, Like I said, they were compliant. They had anti-money laundering. They were fully anti-money laundering compliant. They had anti-money laundering KYC and a global rule book that every bank agrees to and signs up with the contract, literally, right? And it's a rule book that they all agree to. So before signing up to RippleNet, and they are fully compliant. Like RippleNet, many years ago, like 6-7 years ago, Brad Garlinghouse said that they had 300 banks signed up to RippleNet and that they were signing up 6 banks per week. It was always saying, first they were saying 5 banks per week, then a few weeks later, 6 banks per week, every week. And this was 7 years ago. So they had 300 banks, they were signing up 6 banks per week. There's 52 weeks per year, so it's 300 banks per year. They've been signing up over 300 banks per year for 7 years, which is a total of 2,100 banks. Some of the biggest banks in the world, Standard Charter and so on and so forth. Literally, they would have minimum right now 2,400 banks just with the banks they were signing up independently. This doesn't account for all the payment providers and tech companies that have integrated RippleNet. If you look at Swift, Swift is using Ripple. I'm gonna show you either now or other video where Swift is using Ripple. This is anybody's done a load of research knows that Swift is using Ripple. They were never competitors. They said like, oh, we're competing, we're gonna take over Swift, but the plan was always for Ripple to connect into RippleNet. It's always been the plan. Actually, I'm gonna show you the same guy here. He was with Swift for 20 years. He talks about how Swift uses Ripple, or Ripple is complementary to Swift. Listen to this very, very carefully, my friend.
Surrounding crypto replacing Swift, you mentioned that it's not necessarily about replacing Swift, it's about complementing it. Let's get some more information on this.
I used to work for Swift. I was Swift for 20 years, so Swift is flowing through my veins. Swift is the preeminent messaging system for the financial industry. And I think we're also seeing Swift changing the network capability so that real time will be a possibility as well. But we may also see Ripple XRP moving across the Swift network as a currency when we're perhaps using something like FX.
Isn't that interesting? We might see Ripple XRP moving through Swift. Swift is dinosaur tech. You can't do anything without Ripple. It'll be moving through XRP when they use FX. Every cross-border payment is an FX transaction. You need to go from one currency to another. That's Forex market, FX. So when they try to downplay it sometimes, oh, well, it'll just be for FX. It's all FX. Every cross-border payment is technically FX, right? So there's a guy that said he's been with Ripple for 20 years. He's been with Swift for 20 years. He was a general manager at Swift. And he said, Swift runs through my vein. Like it's in my blood. And then he goes on to say how Swift is changing their capabilities so that they can do real-time payments. Real-time payments means instant settlement. That's Ripple, okay? Then he goes on to say, like I said, we'll see XRP moving through Swift. Isn't that interesting? I'm going to throw in a little bonus for you guys here. Some of you probably saw this. You know how we've all been told that it was Nakamoto that invented Bitcoin. We don't know who he is. The white paper only came out in 2010. This is when the idea of Bitcoin was actually invented. If you Google search Bitcoin patent David Schwartz, there's a patent on distributed ledger technology, a multi-level distributed computer system for distributed processing, preferably includes a plurality of computers. You read this patent, it's technically the Bitcoin patent, and it was awarded to David Schwartz in 1989. This is 21 years before the Bitcoin white paper came out. David Schwartz is the chief cryptographer of Ripple, and he was working for a very powerful 3-letter agency that I don't even want to say the name. I'll actually show you instead, because I don't even want to say the name of this 3-letter agency. I prefer avoid mentioning these agencies when I can. So yeah, he worked for the most powerful 3-letter agency in the world at the time, right here, right? Joel, this is his profile, David Schwartz, on the Ripple website. I zoomed it in here. Read right here what agency he was working for. Right here, my friend, right at the bottom here. Starts with an okay? It's saying that he was working to them. They're doing cloud encryption, cloud storage, encrypted cloud storage. I don't believe it. I think he was doing more than cloud storage there. Then in 1997, there was a document that came from another 3-letter agency, very powerful agency, and it was how to make a mint, how to create a mint, the cryptography of anonymous electronic cash, cryptography, okay? And the same thing, this 3-letter agency, 2 3-letter agencies worked on it. The white paper only came out in 2010. The story we've been told about Bitcoin, the reason that they told us that Bitcoin was invented by some kind of guy, we don't know who he is, it wasn't government, so on, is because they wanted us to accept the digitization of everything, digital currencies, because with CBDCs, the government can see everything you do. You can see everything that you've ever done once it's on blockchain. The goal was to move us into a digital age where everything is digitized and tokenized, And like I said, we never would have, we would have been more resistant if we would have known resistant to the idea of digitization, if we would have known that it was actually the government that invented it. This is why they told us it was Nakamoto. We don't know who he is. It was this guy that was anti-bank, anti-government. He wanted us to be able to separate from the banks and not have to rely on government, not have to rely on the banks. You know, that he was a free thinker. This is what they told us. That's not true, my friends. Right here, you see the origins of the SHA-256 hashing algorithm, which was part of Bitcoin technology. You see this, they had this technology years before, and you see this three-letter agency again. Talks about the history of it. All right, guys, well, thank you so much for listening. That's it for me. Thanks so much for listening, and please like and subscribe, leave a comment, much appreciated. And sorry I was so passionate as well. My convictions on crypto, sometimes I get pretty passionate. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your support.